Hello and welcome to another episode of the Rebel Education Podcast. I'm Tom Rogers. In this episode, which I recorded earlier today as a live stream, I'm talking about going back to work. Those who might be struggling with this feeling at the moment of returning to work, and discussing some strategies that I've learned or experienced over the years that have maybe helped me through some of these tough periods. So I hope you enjoy the podcast. And as always, you can subscribe on Spotify, iTunes, or Podbean. I look forward to hearing your feedback on the podcast, and thanks for listening. Hello, I'm Tom Rogers, and this is the Rebel Education Podcast. Hi everybody, and I thought I'd just record a quick video live stream for people who are preparing to go back to work on Monday, Tuesday, and just to share a few things that might potentially help. Maybe not, maybe they will, maybe they won't. Before I start with that, it's just to say thanks for everybody who's messaged me. Obviously, I've been going through quite a tough time at the minute, so just thanks to everyone who's messaged. In terms of this stream, I just want to focus on that feeling of going back, because I noticed a few posts in the last few days talking about teachers being negative about going back. But you know, the thing is that it's not necessarily being negative. It can be that you're feeling really anxious. You love teaching, but you're feeling really anxious about everything around it. Everything's going to happen on that first week back. All the conversations that are going to happen, the things that are going to happen in lessons, the difficult challenges you might have in those lessons, etc. And that can pile up, and that can just overwhelm to the point where you can't think about anything else. You can't sleep. You're having the bad dreams about going back. You're waking up in the middle of the night. You're dreading going back. You're thinking, how am I going to get through the first day back, never mind the first week back? All those kind of emotions, and it's really overwhelming. So when you share something, whether it be on social media or whether it be face-to-face with somebody, and you say, you know what, I'm not looking forward to going back, and then other people say, well, I'm really looking forward to going back. They might be, but there's also a high chance they might not be. They might be saying that, A, to reassure themselves. B, it could be because they're in a school or an environment where they're expected to always be Mr. or Mrs. Positivity, and they've got to shine the light on social media. They've got to shine the light face to face and say, I'm loving it, I'm up for this, I'm positive all the time. And that's good for them, because that will probably keep them going. But for you, it might not be good, because you're looking and going, oh, everyone else is positive and I'm not. And again, I think the first thing I've written down here is trying not to compare to other people. And I'm the worst. I used to be the worst one to do that. Coming back in on inset days, I remember looking round, looking at the faces and thinking, that person's in a much better place than me. That person's in a much better place than me. That person's in a much better place than me. And eventually I'd be sat there going, I'm feeling terrible in my head right now, and everyone else is feeling great. That was not going to be the case. But it's very, very easy to get into that mindset and think that is the case, that everyone else is loving it, living the dream, and you're not, and you're really thinking about it all. And inset days can be terrible anyway, because as we know, you might get a pile up of 100, 200, 300 items on the to-do list. And you're thinking, oh God, how am I going to get all these done? But I think the trap that I've fallen into many times in the past on inset day is thinking, I've got to get all these done now, thinking about all 100 of the things on the list at the same time, rather than thinking, right, this is day one out of quite a number of days in this term and in this year that are left. And I'm already thinking it's day one, and I'm already thinking I've got to do all of this stuff now. rather than, practically, logically thinking, I can spend a little bit of time thinking about what I'm going to do and what I'm not going to do, and just chilling out a little bit, basically. And sometimes schools don't help with that, because in inset day it's full on, it's intense, it's right, we've got to, and sometimes you've got to manage it yourself, because no one else is going to manage it for you. That's what I've found in the past. It's been up to me, and I sometimes haven't been able to do that, and I've just got in a right muddle in my head and got really down, got really anxious, whatever the feelings are, and not been able to manage it. I've always gone in and done the job, but it's been stressful. One thing that's helped me in the past is to always think about the core job that I'm doing and the individual lessons that I need to teach. So rather than think, right, I've got a term coming up, think about day one, think about the 4, 5, 6 lessons you've got and what you're going to do in those lessons, rather than anything else. And the other thing is, as well, that's helped me in the past, is to think about the students themselves in the lessons and what they're thinking, because they've just had the Christmas holiday. They're not thinking about how good your lesson is. They're not thinking about your delivery of that lesson and how good your delivery of the lesson is. Some of those students will be delighted to be in your lesson because you've created an atmosphere and an environment that they're going to be loving to be a part of. They're going to be thinking, oh, this is a safe environment for me, this is a relaxed environment for me. It doesn't matter about sometimes the content or the way you're delivering it or how you feel or the activity or whatever it is. Some students will genuinely just be happy to be there. And I, again, worst enemy, would never think about what the students are thinking coming back. I'd just be thinking about myself and how bad I was feeling or I was dreading it, whatever, rather than those students are going to be looking forward to that lesson. So in a way, it doesn't matter what you do as long as you're there, because you're facilitating that environment just by setting those expectations, setting the boundaries, doing what you normally do, doing your standard thing is going to be enough for so many of those kids in those lessons. And thinking that it has to be perfect and it has to be brilliant and it has to, and again, that's partly if you're in a school culture where people are expecting you to be firing on all cylinders all the time and it's all brilliant. That's part of that. Obviously, it's not your fault if you feel like you've got to perform every lesson at some kind of superhero level. That's not your fault, is it? And that's what I just normalised an expectation of myself that wasn't positive or good. So the other thing that I would say was good for me was to think, well, what's the word? I remember my mum said to me once, I think it was actually a job interview that I had, and she said, well, what's the worst that's going to happen? And I always think, right, there's 10 deadlines in the next 2-3 weeks. What's the worst thing that's going to happen even if you miss 50% of those deadlines? At the end of the day, we are in the middle in the UK of biggest recruitment and retention crisis the profession's ever seen, and yet teachers are worried about keeping their jobs on a daily basis, which is a confusing paradox for me, because teachers are incredibly valuable commodities. So I think a really helpful thing for me, what I thought of in the past is, right, what's the worst thing that can possibly happen if I don't do this, or if this happens, or if that happens, and often it's nothing. It's kids who walk out going, oh, that was a bit different from normal, on to the next lesson. Or, oh, what did you do in school today? Oh, we had a history lesson and Mr. Rogers was a little bit off colour, but forgotten. Move on. They're not going to be dwelling on it for an hour at night, and the families aren't. They're going to have forgotten about it before they've even gone to bed. And you might ruminate on that for a week, and certainly I've done that, especially in my first few years of teaching. I've got diaries that I've kept where I've been ruminating on things that happened 2 weeks ago with a class. What's going to happen in the next lesson with this class? They never would have even thought about it, and yet I'm there ruminating on. As I said, putting yourself in the mind of the child is I think really, really helpful if you're dreading going back. And what do the children need? What do the children want? What are the children going to be doing in your lessons? Not what is anybody else thinking or doing or demanding Ed Zarell wrote a really good leader for the TES the other day, I think it was yesterday, where he was talking about just think about what the kids need, and kind of rejecting, if you like, actively rejecting things that you know are not helpful for the students. And I know in some cases that's not possible. I know that full well, but in some cases it is. And I think back now and I think, well, I could have said no. I could have just said no. What would have happened? Again, one I guess positive as well with a new term, any new term, is being able to reset with the students and talk about expectations again. You know, it might have been that last term you were not happy with behaviour, for example, or elements of behaviour. Now's a chance to reset and think about, right, okay, I've got a chance now to realign, reset, get them back on track, and have another go. So there's many, you know, when you're dreading it and you're thinking, oh God, last term was terrible. Yeah, there are probably lots of things to be anxious about, but on the flip side, there's probably things that you can actually change now that you couldn't change in the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks of term, that you've got a chance to change now going back. Behaviour is one of them, resetting expectations and doing that. And it might be that you think, right, I'm going to be more assertive with SLT. You know, I'm going to be more assertive in saying, look, I want support on X, Y, Z this term. It's a new term. This happened last term. I want this, this and this. And this is why I want it. And I want things to change. Speaking to a couple of teachers the last few days, and really struggling, not only with going back, dreading it. Do think about, is it the school? You know, is it you as a teacher or is it the school? Is it you, I don't enjoy teaching? Because often when it comes down to that question, do you enjoy teaching students? The answer is predominantly yes. Are you dreading going back because of everything that's going to happen? Yeah, I am, but not in lessons. In fact, when people close the classroom door, that's often the safest place. For me, it has been. You know, I've been through several really rough times in my mental health. As soon as I've closed that classroom door and I've gone in there, teaching has been one of the few times where I can take my mind off whatever it is that I'm thinking about outside. And for many teachers, that is the same. So therefore, if it is about the school, can you change it? And I've spoken to a couple of teachers who said, I could actually, yeah. You know, it could be a young teacher who's got their NQT year done. And I'm thinking, well, I'll move schools, change it, leave whenever you want, you know, terms notice. And people will say, oh, that's a bit mercenary, or that's a bit, well, not really, if it's your health and your well-being that's up for grabs. And if it's a case of you remaining in the profession and having another crack at another school, then what's wrong with that? What's wrong with leaving now? What's wrong with saying that I'm going? I'll make up that term from Easter till the summer in wages some other way, you know, even if I have to do a bit of supply, and then I'll restart in another school in September. If there isn't that option there, then obviously I really sympathise, and that's the worst thing sometimes that I read on Twitter is, oh, we'll just change schools. But sometimes you can't do that if you have a mortgage and a family and you're tied in. You can't do it. But another thing you could do is, okay, again, looking at your list of things that are stressing you about going back, is any of what are associated with your TLR, what are associated with your responsibility? Can you drop that responsibility? Why are you keeping that responsibility? Is it because you want to advance your career? Well, you could still advance your career by dropping that responsibility and re-entering leadership at another point. So, you know, for me personally now, I've gone, I'm going to be history teaching probably in the next 6 months. Prior to that, I've had my head of history, I've had my first SLT role. So will I go back? Well, yeah, I might do, I might not. I'm not sure. What's wrong with that? It does, you know. So I think we as teachers, as professionals, get very wrapped up in the ladder sometimes, and keeping on that ladder, keeping that trajectory. The time's on your side. Massive recruitment retention crisis. Reset, restart, rest. Rest. You know, if you need to, if you can. And if you can't do those things, then get support from somewhere, whether that's education support partnership, whether that's, you know, certainly for me, I'm going to be accessing different levels of support on personal, professional level. You know, yeah, sometimes you've got to do that and take that step back. Final thing was, you know, 13 years now, I think, for me in the profession, and I've always done it. I've always gone back. However bad I've felt, I have gone back, and more often than not, it's been okay. It's been okay in the end, even if it's where I've left a job and then I've taken another one. It's always okay in the end, and that's your mind can play massive tricks with you this time of year. And I always found going back after Christmas was actually one of the hard. I'd actually say it was harder going back after Christmas sometimes than it was going back at the end of the summer. Simply because there was less to look forward to. And I've written down another one here of lining something up on the first weekend to do. So like whatever it might be, a trip or whatever, something, some holiday, book a holiday or something. Because I always found after Christmas was incredibly difficult. I remember one, this would have been 8 or 9 years ago now. Again, stuff was going on in my personal life at the time, but I remember sat at my desk crying my eyes out on the inset day. So everyone else, I was teaching in a mobile classroom, so I was out the way, and I just remember sitting at my desk crying my eyes out. And I was thinking, well, someone could walk in right now. My head of department could walk in, my head teacher could walk in, whoever could just walk in. Right? I couldn't help it. I was just like in bits, and it was a culmination of issues. So don't feel bad. Like that's the way it is. You know, like what we put so much pressure on ourselves to be like amazing, and I don't think sometimes, like I've said, social media helps with that either. So just bear in mind that regardless of what people say, whether it's to your face or on social media, it could be complete rubbish. I'm feeling brilliant about going back. Are you though? Or is this part of some kind of thing that you're saying to yourself? There's nothing wrong with that. If they're doing that for them, that's their way of coping, and that's great. But if it impacts you, that's where the problem is. Because as I said, I'd be listening to comments or in face-to-face social media, whatever, and I'd be going, oh, everyone's ready, everyone's looking forward, and I'm not. What's wrong with me? But later on, you're thinking, well, hang on a minute. You know, not necessarily. Definitely not. So just keep that in mind. Thanks, everybody, and I hope... I just thought I'd do this video because I'm hoping some of it will resonate or help, or somebody who's thinking, I am hating the thought of going back. It might help in some way. So thanks, everybody, and thanks for the comments as well through the video, and take care. Thanks a lot. Thanks for all the messages as well, because they've been really, really helpful for me in the last few days. So thanks, everyone. Cheers. Bye.